Hello, I'm Soycat and welcome back to the second channel geography video. Today I'm doing something a little bit different to what I usually do on the channel because right now I'm in the geographic center point of the EU. That's right, if you take all of the current EU members as of 2018 and all of their current territories as of 2018 that are part of the EU, officially as of 2018, then what you'll find is that this is the geographic center of all of that territory. If you, or the more poetic way to put it, as they say here, is that if you were to balance all of the EU members, states onto a pin, this is the point where it would all balance perfectly. And I kind of like that analogy, but yeah, we're here at Western Garund. It's an interesting place by itself. It's in Bavaria, Germany, in case you are curious. So, I mean, you can kind of see it looks like Bavaria around me. It was an interesting journey to get here, and there's also
a bunch of flags here too. One to represent the EU, one to represent Germany, one for Bavaria, one for what I assume must be the city, and one which I could only see as the flag of Singapore or of Poland or anything like that.
We've got all these flags around here, and as well as this fun little map here. Again, I like that they've made it into a real attraction, but what I found interesting is not what the thing is right here, in Western Garund. This will exist for another year or so until, no doubt, the center point changes. What I found interesting is that the geographic center point of the EU obviously has changed a lot over the years. The EU has expanded not only in terms of whenever new territories are removed or added from the EU, but also there's been big expansions over the past couple of decades, and this means, interestingly enough, that when the EU last expanded, before that, the middle point of the EU was in Germany before. Before that, before Romania and Bulgaria added, the middle point of the EU was in Germany as well. Long story short, the middle of the EU, the EU is centered around Germany, you could say, literally the heart of Germany in the case of Bavaria, and this kind of cuts into a really interesting point that a lot of people like to raise about the EU, which is that it is centered around Germany. And if someone tells you that the center of the EU is Germany, it's a pretty easy thing to get down with, because you're like, well, if you look at the euro, it's basically, the Deutschmark, right? It's based entirely on that. It's got the same kind of fiscal policy, and it's backed mostly by Germany. If you look at the fact that, let me show you a map of all of the countries and the country they trade with most, with a flag. As you can see, it's just a huge German flag map. Most countries do the most trade with Germany, and a part of that, one of the reasons that is so successful, is because of the EU. Within the EU, there is tariff-free trade, and because of that, a lot of countries trade a lot more with Germany. And when you look at both of those two things, which are two of the biggest tenets of the single market, of the European Union, you can see how, the EU being centered around Germany kind of starts to make sense, right?
Der hat uns den Mittelfinger gezeigt. Ja, he showed us the middle finger.
Really?
Yeah.
What the fuck? Is it on the video?
I don't know.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
What a rude German man. But as a British person, and therefore as some amount of Eurosceptic, you've seen on this channel that, not necessarily always on favour of everything with the EU, and obviously as a British person, the Euro is a terrible idea, and obviously all of these different things, I want to kind of jump back to Germany and kind of discuss some of the laziest arguments you see all over the place online, because the arguments people use to say that the EU is this German puppet state project, really, they're very lazy, If you're going to make one, I feel like you shouldn't base it on that, because, again, if you look at it, yes, Germany is the country with the highest GDP in the entire continent. However, Germany is the most populated country within the EU. Something like 1 in every 5 people in the EU lives in Germany, despite having 28 member states. So it makes sense that they're going to have the highest total GDP. They don't do the best per capita, it's just that lots of people, lots of money, very successful country before and even after a EU. The second thing is obviously that even though they do a lot of trade with the rest of the continent, a lot of people, like to see this as they're decimating the factories elsewhere. But no, the way free trade works is it is a mutually beneficial thing for both parties. No one forces you to trade with Germany. No one forces Germany to trade with you. You can always, choose not to in any particular case, but people don't. They choose it based on the price, based on the quality. It's a widely accepted phenomenon that free trade benefits both parties. It's only in the last 10 or so years that people are starting to use that as a bad thing, like, oh, free trade, what a terrible idea, right? And again, there are some instances, if you look at China with bad players, where it's at least questionable at least, but in the case of just, oh, let's sell things that are good, it's hard to make an argument. So consider the opposite side of that argument. Consider the fact that Germany pays the most into the EU budget. And I don't just mean in total terms, they contribute the most money in, because of course they've got the largest gross national income, which is how contributions are based, and they are the largest country by population and GDP. It makes sense, but also they contribute the most in terms of they put the most money in, they get some money out, but in terms of the amount they put in versus the amount put out, it's a huge loss. They sink a lot of money into the EU in exchange for this free trade evil that you might be thinking of, if you do think of it that way. But, and a lot of that money goes for regional development. It goes for farmers. It goes for a lot of different weird projects that you may or may not support. But regardless of what you think about them, they are funded by Germany, and they're not necessarily directly in Germany's interests, right? In a similar way, look at the EU, how the EU actually works. The two bodies of the EU that are decided by European people / member states / governments. There's the European Commission, which is one European Council, I should say, one member state per country. Malta, a country with a significantly smaller population, try and show a little graph right here, has the same representation on that council as Germany. Cyprus, same representation. Luxembourg, same representation. Spain, Portugal, whatever country, whatever size, one vote, one member state. And it has to be unanimous most of the time. Actually, that's where a lot of the Poland-Hungary issues are coming in. But then also think about the European Parliament. You have I know there's a big parliament that all of Europe, has, and it's dominated by Germany. That is proof that, there's the fun joke of what if we could get everyone to do their politics over here? Maybe, it's like a, fun, get everyone to, join the German political system. But the truth is that Germany is the one country which gets underrepresented if you look into it. There is a cap on the number of MEPs any country can have. It's at 96, I believe, right now. And that means that Germany, despite having a population that would warrant, I think it's 99 or 100 MEPs, they get 96 flat. And also, because it scales with population, but there is a minimum, the number of population per MEP, it's over 800,000 in Germany. There is 800,000 German people per one representative in the 700-something man parliament, whereas in Malta, it's 80,000. There is 10 times the representation in Malta or Cyprus. Again, this isn't aimed against them. I'm just saying, when you look at the actual political system, it isn't stacked in their favor. It's quite the opposite, in fact, that it's stacked in favor of the small countries. And yeah, consider the countries that actually benefit the most, in terms of put in versus put out. I mean, of course, in terms of the budget, there are countries like Belgium, where Belgium is a relatively small country, but a lot of the European, politics, money goes into Belgium. Consider France, which benefits hugely from the agricultural subsidies. Consider countries like Ireland, which benefit from being in the single market but having the lower tax rates. Consider all of these different examples of a country, Luxembourg. There are so many countries which benefit hugely, and all of these countries are doing a lot better in terms of per capita in certain ways. Germany isn't the richest country, and that's kind of my point I'm trying to raise right here, that it's a really lazy and one-dimensional argument to just point at it and say that, yeah, this is, Germany dominated, because there's a reason all of these countries joined the EU in the first place. There are 28 member states of the EU. Were they first forced to join? No, it's kind of the opposite, actually. There is criteria you have to meet. You have to go through certain steps, and although some countries had certain lies about that, countries are choosing to join the EU even right now. Admittedly, it's like Western Balkan countries. You might say, well, they're not doing so great without it regardless. But the fact that so many countries kept choosing to join the EU before the big, Euro crisis of the last 5 to 10 years, countries wanted to join it, and countries benefited hugely from doing so. And I think the best argument to really drive this one fully through, by the way, it is getting quite dark here as the sun is slowly setting. Hopefully it's a beautiful part of the video and not just a weird thing. But consider, if you really think that the goal of the EU is to be the United States of Europe, which I think, is clearly somewhere in there, it's one of the key aims to eventually be something like that. But if you consider okay, so United States of Europe, what is the USE clearly based on? The USA. Look at the USA, 50-state union, vastly different, performing sizes and benefits or whatever. Which states benefit the most from the union? Which states, have to put in the most? Is Mississippi a state that's really being screwed over by the union for being too small, and whereas California is reaping all of the benefits? Not quite. Both California and Texas are the ones that want to leave the union, whereas the smaller states with the tax evasion, Delaware, I believe, is where all the banks headquarter, just because they have no state taxes on that sort of stuff. And it's those are the states that benefit from being in the huge union of 300 million people in all these states, where all the stuff is going down in the bigger states. And that's my kind of basic example right here, that the truth is, in any big federation-style system, it is a better deal to be a smaller country. It's in terms of per person, if you are just a person in a country, if you were going to pick an EU member state to live in to have the most representation, the most say, the most, power within that 500 million member bloc, you wouldn't pick Germany. You get the least representation in that way, unless you can rise through the ranks, become the chancellor, and then hope that you somehow influence decision making. The most say you have, if you're just a citizen, is going to be in Malta. It's going to be in Cyprus. And really, I just wanted to mention that the thing is, people fail to realise that one of the reasons the EU is against country splitting, the reason that they're not for Catalonia secession or even Scotland leaving the UK, it would be beneficial to the EU to keep Scotland and lose the rest of the UK, or have Irish unification. The reason that the EU is not directly in favour of these things is not just because the member states, Spain doesn't want to have Catalonia secede, therefore the EU doesn't want to. It's also because that gives the Spain bloc more votes. It's the same way where if California splits into 6 states in America, they just get 6 times more representation, and it means their side swings over. There are huge advantages to being small in a federation, and the fact that people look at it and swing it the other way is kind of this biggest tactic of misinformation that I really don't like, because while people are focusing on this mega project going on in Europe that's the Germans taking over again, while people are focusing on that, they're not talking about the real issues. So for instance, again, my personal beliefs right here a little bit, this is Euro politics or whatever, but the fact that there is a currency union without having all of the necessary backing for that and without having properly backed rules, really bizarre idea. The euro, again, like monetary union without fiscal union, what is that? Why did anyone agree to that without even fiscal rules that had to be properly followed? The Greece crisis is because they had the heavy deficit that followed that. So that's a ridiculous idea. The Schengen area, again, aspirational goal. What if there was one great territory you could travel across? Like right now, if I wanted to, I can go to, actually, let me show you the map quickly. If I want to, the Schengen area means I can go to, over here, don't worry. I can go to all of these countries right here, no borders crossed. Really cool idea, but where's the backing up for it? The reason that the migrant crisis, which is the thing that everyone hates right now, the reason that happened is because there's no common secure external border. They've only just got round to giving, I think Frontex, the EU border control agency, has like 10,000 staff. They only just got round to actually funding an EU border control. If you're going to have abolish internal borders, you better enforce the external ones, and that's something that wasn't, I guess, truly considered. Really bad idea. Again, both these things, these are what you should be focusing on. Like, either go back on the first thing or fix it into the second thing. In the same way, EU copyright law, isn't it ridiculous that, the meme ban or the link tax or whatever buzzword you've heard online, isn't that ridiculous that that was signed kind of behind closed doors, despite the public going against it and then it coming back? That's ridiculous. We need to look into situations like that. You need to be thinking like, why don't you vote out the MEPs doing that to you? All these sorts of, the rule of law violations in Hungary and Poland, and they're using their vetoes on each other to, basically avoid getting banned from that sort of thing. And although it is for the reasons I mentioned earlier about the migrant crisis, the fact that they can basically, slowly abolish rule of law in their countries in an EU member state and still get EU funding, in the case of Poland and Hungary, that is a problem. Like being, the fact that, as a system, the EU just has to keep on giving money to countries breaking the EU's rules, that is something where you got to be like, wait, what's the deal with that? And long story short, there are many, 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 many problems with the EU. As a British person, we're doing that, that whole thing that is the big Euro news at the moment, or of the last 2 years that hasn't really been going anywhere. But as a British person, I'm sure I can tell you non-stop, there are lots of problems with Europe. In fact, that seems to be the overwhelming British opinion. Lots of people think that the split in the UK was like 52% of people love the EU, 48% of people hate the EU. It's more like everyone vaguely feels and skeptical of it. Again, most of the country is skeptical, and some of the country thinks there's a lot of issues. Some of the people think it's worth staying despite the issues. That's what the referendum really kind of came down to, and that is because all of these things are just kind of going unaddressed in the kind of just continuous evolution. And although this is a good time to talk about those issues, when people turn it into a simplified thing, we miss a lot of the key points. And that's why I just want to say right here, in a lot of arguments you see online, one of the most clever things you can do if you're against something that's common sense is just throw a bunch of disinformation in there. That's what, I'm not going to point the finger at, these Russian trolls or whatever you've heard about, but a lot of disinformation comes from a lot of sources, and it's really clever because when you can turn a facts-based argument into a feeling-based one, you can basically argue any point you want, even if it's the opposite of reality, which, again, I believe the EU Germany point is. So one last thing before we go right here, because there is a little point over here. They reference the previous village. Wait, so again, this is a whole little tourist attraction. They reference the just get a little view here, but they reference the previous village that was the centre point of the EU, and they reference something here like thank you for handing over the baton, and we hope that the point won't the point will not disappear mysteriously. And I thought that was kind of sad that because of this flag right here, the centre point's going to change when new member states join, and this won't be the centre of the EU forever. but the new centre of the EU will also probably be in Germany, actually. So, yeah, with that said, thank you very much for watching today's video. And just for a little bit of fun at the end here, do you want to show people how Germans count to 1, 2, 3, 4 with your hands?
Like this one or this one?
The weird one with the thumb.
Yeah, this one.
It really is a real thing. I still can't ever quite get over it. And there you go, fun fact. So anyway, with all of that said, I hope you did all enjoy this video about the EU and whatever. I will warn you that if you read the comments, it's going to be just a messy place. Any discussion like this, people immediately delve into like the immediate, you know, like they're attacked at their feelings. They're going to attack back with just like, really, you know, like my correction is that you said it was the 4th Nazi regime. This is the 5th Nazi record. They're going to say some bizarre stuff like that. The comments can be a bad place. I'd recommend you check out the Reddit if you want to maybe have a reasonable discussion. If you disagree with all of this, I think, you know, there is place for that. Maybe you think that although the EU, you know, has downsides all that different way, maybe you think the upsides and the, you know, the future development is good. You know, having a United States of Europe maybe benefits Germany the most because it kind of matches, you know, the EU model is kind of matching what happened with Germany, where it slowly unified over, you know, like 100 years and then just became a mega state, and it kind of matches what's happening right here. But anyway, with that said, check out the Reddit if you want to discuss that and anything else. The EU is just one of those subjects I feel like I could talk about forever because it's just such a weird, fascinating, not quite knowing where it's going kind of thing. And although maybe it goes a bad place, maybe a good place, I just want to kind of cover it in the best way I can without attaching the feelings of like, it's objectively bad, needs to be destroyed, or it's objectively good and we need to have, you know, a United States of Europe that rules the world. I feel somewhere, honestly, not in the middle, but I feel some bits for both, and I hope that that helps to inform you in this video.
Thank you very much for watching this video. I will plug the Reddit one more time, just to let you know you can check that out. This video was a really weird and hard one to put together because it got dark and all that sort of thing, and I hope that you enjoyed it regardless. With that said, I'll see you all in the next one. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.